Hi, everybody. This is Tracy. Do you feel hurt, angry? Do you feel weak? Do you feel shame, guilt? All of these emotional baggage items can hold on to us and keep us prisoner after we've been in an abusive relationship. Our own self-esteem has been squished down to be very, very little. So what if you could be free of all of these emotional triggers, all of these feelings that you don't want to be holding on to right now? Today, we're going to learn the dangers of holding on to emotional attachments so that you can experience the power of letting go. I have a very special guest today. His name is Cliff Edwards, and not only is he a friend of mine, but he is a empowerment forgiveness expert. And Cliff has been teaching and training and coaching for almost 20 years. He's the author of one of my favorite books, The Forgiveness Handbook by Cliff Edwards. So let's give a warm welcome to Cliff. And thank you, Cliff, for joining us.
Hey, I'm really thrilled to be here. It's great to get a chance to chat with you, Tracy.
Well, I have been so impressed with your work, and we're going to share later how we have a special connection. So, Cliff, you're known as a transformational coach. What does that mean?
Well, I love the word transformation, and I think almost everybody can relate to that in some form or another. What that really means is I support people to transform either particular aspects of their lives or their entire lives. But the truth is when you transform one aspect of your life, then it seems like everything else in your life changes as well. And in the context we're talking about here, we're working with people who are coming out of traumatic situations, who really are looking for some form of transforming the old into the new. And that's what I do, is I have processes and exercises and structures and proven methods for transforming from the old or from the past into a future that you desire.
Well, as you know, I work with victims of narcissist abuse, emotional, physical, and they're all trying to move on. But a lot of us don't know what it means to move on. What does it really mean? What should they be going for?
The whole idea of moving on, that's commonly tossed around. And I guess there are lots of different interpretations of what people think that means. But to me, moving on means that you no longer are stuck in the patterns of the past. And so that's not just the behavior patterns, it's also the thought patterns. It's the old emotional ways of being and the old emotions. It's the old negative judgments. It's the old anger, the old hurts, the old sensitivities. And so knowing that you work with people who are coming out of narcissistic abuse, my heart really goes out to people in that experience, because they've experienced, well, you too, you've experienced so much negativity and so much manipulation. And it's really easy to get stuck in a victim mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the moving on is really moving completely out of that victim mindset and into the mindset of an empowered and really self-determining, confident person.
I think that's what we all want. But
Exactly.
if we don't get to that point, well, like, what's the cost? If we just think, okay, I'm better, I'm just ready to start again, what's the cost if we don't let go of that anger, as you said, the anger and the resentment?
Yeah, there's so many costs. And ultimately, the cost of it is your full self-expression. It's your mental health. It's your physical well-being. It's your happiness. Mm-hmm. It's your ability to be who you choose to be. It's your ability to be self-determining in life. As long as you're stuck in the past, you're going to be affected by the old thought patterns of the past, the anger or the resentment, or you're going to be negatively affected by the fear or holding on to the desire for revenge of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're shaking your head.
A lot of my viewers are, they deal with letting go of that hurt, that resentment, and they don't know what to do. And that's why I thought you were going to be the perfect guest to enlighten us on how we get to that next stage.
Yeah, and really the cost is that you then continue to drag the perpetrator around with you
Mm.
where you go. And so you may have escaped physically, but as long as you're holding on to the anger, the resentment, the blame, as long as you're holding on to all of those negative judgments about that person, they're present in your reality every moment of every day.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. As long as you're stuck in those old patterns and those old thoughts, if you see somebody that looks like the perpetrator, you see somebody that looks like your ex,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you go off.
You go,
Right, you get frozen, you get caught up in those old patterns again.
yeah.
And so the cost is your ability to just be you in the world
Mm-hmm.
instead of being the victim.
And it's letting go of those things that make us get to the next stage, right? We hold on to that, like you're saying, it's like they're on our back the whole time.
Yeah, I refer to it as a burden. It's like the burden of the past. It's things that you drag around.
Mm-hmm.
An analogy I've used sometimes. Think of each one of those little negative thoughts or resentments or angers as like a little metal plate you slap on yourself. And then another, and then another, and another. If you have just a handful of those, it's not that big a deal. But if you're dragging around 10 years, 15 years, 5 years worth of that stuff, you're going to be weighed down. Not only weighed down mentally, but emotionally, spiritually, and possibly even physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's something that I think all of the survivors on this channel want to get to. And how do you think we can get there?
All right. Well, I'm going to use a word here that I call sometimes call the F word. Right. Yes. It's all language here. And that F word is forgiveness. And I know that may sound like a dirty word to a lot of people. And I bet you have listeners out there who have made the claim, I will never forgive him or her for what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All of them.
There are a lot of reasons not to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one really, really good reason to forgive.
And what's that?
And that is to be able to move on and live your own life on your terms.
But doesn't it mean that if I forgive, if they forgive, that we're like saying it's okay for what they did?
No, absolutely not. No, forgiving is not condoning.
Mm.
See, I wrote a book, and I know you have read my book. I wrote a book called The Forgiveness Handbook, and I wrote it really to address many of the misconceptions about what forgiveness is and why people would want to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many misconceptions out there, and there's so much baggage attached to the word forgiveness.
I know.
So I like to approach it, and I like to think about it and talk about it in very different ways. So the first thing to understand is that forgiveness is something you do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, I grew up in a religious home, and if my sister and I had a fight or I got angry at one of my sisters, my mother would make us apologize, and then she would make us, all right, forgive your sister. All right, I forgive. So I would do it on a mental level, or I'd say the words, but I hadn't actually made the decision myself, and I hadn't actually forgiven. I was still holding on to that anger or whatever my sister had done, that resentment towards her. Mm-hmm. But I, even though I said the words, I was still trapped in that negative judgment and the negative emotions. And so it's important to understand that forgiveness is something to do for yourself in order to set yourself free.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you're holding on to anger or resentment or negative judgments and blame, it's like you've got that person attached to you. They're with you every moment of every day. So think about that. If you want a good reason to forgive, think about, oh, I can finally be free of that
Yeah.
person.
It's
What?
like kicking the baggage to the curb. You're just able to release them, because every time you don't release them and you get that trigger, like you said, you hear someone's voice, you pass a restaurant that you used to go to, you know, you have these things that come, and the triggers are emotionally charging us, right? And
Right.
forgiveness would help break that bind of emotions to an event.
True forgiveness. Yeah. Real forgiveness on an emotional level. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we go for.
And,
We don't go for the words, I forgive. We really go for the deep forgiveness that allows you to be free.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another one of the misconceptions. Well, I know you've got some more questions. So,
No, I want to know about the misconceptions.
well, another one of the misconceptions is that, well, if I forgive, it means they won.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you relate to that one?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It's making it okay, but it means they won.
Right.
Or another misconception that's similar is if I forgive, it means that I've got to go back to the way things were with them.
Mm-hmm.
It means I've got to let them back into my life. No, absolutely not. It doesn't mean they win if you forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it doesn't mean you condone it. Their actions are still inexcusable. Their actions are still wrong.
Right. Right.
Okay? It doesn't mean that, okay, it's all right what you did to me. It just means I am choosing not to hold on to this stuff any longer. I'm choosing to leave this in the past where it belongs so I can live the kind of life I want to in the present and in the future.
I
So,
think the concept's great. I know that we need to do this, but it's so hard when people have been betrayed and hurt. So, what's your advice for them to use this as a tool for themselves?
well, that's the key right there. Use it as a tool for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I use an analogy for forgiveness called the pushpin analogy. I think you and I have talked about this one before. But so, how you forgive is that you shift a negative judgment. See, all negative emotions, all negative belief systems, all anger hinges on some negative judgment. The thought that that wasn't okay. It shouldn't have been like that. That was wrong. That was bad.
Mm-hmm.
So the key to forgiveness is like shifting that negative from a negative to a neutral or preferably a positive. Let me give an example of the pushpin. So I thought of this one day when I was teaching a class in a community room. And over on one side of the wall, there was this big bulletin board, and it was just chocked full of stuff. There were flyers and pictures and newspaper articles and magazine clippings and all kinds of things. It was really cluttered. And and each one of those things was held in place with a pushpin. Under some of those pushpins were like one item. Under other pushpins was a stack of items. And it occurred to me that all of those things hanging from the pushpins are like the negative emotions, the anger, the negative beliefs, the disempowering thoughts, all of that stuff that goes along with the negative judgment. If that was wrong, that was bad, that shouldn't have happened, it shouldn't have been that way. And then you are the corkboard, and the negative judgment is the pushpin. So when you go up to a corkboard like that and you pull out a pushpin, Tracy, what happens to the stuff that's underneath it?
They're going to fall down.
It falls away, yeah. And so forgiveness is the same way. When you take that negative judgment that you have about something, it shouldn't have been that way, that was so wrong, you take that emotional charge off of it, then everything else just drops away. There's nothing to hold it in place any longer, and you're free of it. Now, the trick is, and you're going to ask this question next, how do you take the negative charge off it? How do you shift that negative judgment?
Mm-hmm.
And really, this happens at an emotional level or an unconscious level as much or more than it does at a conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I've designed my work, or how I design my work, to work at that much deeper level so you can shift it.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick is to be able to make a new interpretation about the event, to make a new meaning about it. You shift a negative judgment by finding something of value, something positive that you can extract from that situation or that experience to propel you forward.
So that, like the silver lining?
Yeah, if you want to put it in more
Cliche?
terms, yeah. Exactly. But not just up here. That's the key. You can do silver linings up in your head all day long, and it won't really shift things. You
No.
have to get it at an emotional level.
Yeah. How do you know if you've reached the emotional level of forgiveness versus having it in your head?
Because you no longer feel burdened by it. It no longer will plug you in.
Mm.
Okay?
Okay.
So I haven't had any long-term relationships with narcissists, but I did have some experiences with a pretty intense mother growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, well, when I was an adolescent, I think I mentioned I grew up in a really religious home.
Mm-hmm.
I was experimenting. I was kind of pulling away, trying different things with religion. And my mom would trap me, and she'd come up with this just really intense energy. And Cliff, I'm worried about you and your relationship with God. And just I'd feel all this guilt and shame and I couldn't stand it. I didn't want anything to do with it. And after that happened a few times, I just made it mean that she was a bad mom and she shouldn't be doing that, because it made me feel awful. I didn't want anything to do with her. And what kind of person would be making her, beloved son feel this way? And so it put a real wedge in between our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I carried that anger towards her and that resentment towards her for years and years. In my early adult years, in late teens and early adult years, I really didn't even want to see her. I didn't want to be around her because of the intensity of her judgments, what I felt were her judgments of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went off exploring other ways of thinking and psychologies and philosophies and theologies and everything else out there. And eventually I ended up in personal development work. And, I had done a lot of work early on, and I began to accept my mom, and my parents, because they were both pretty much that way. My dad, not so much. But I began to accept. I accepted. But even though I accepted and I could have a cordial relationship with my mother,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't gotten to the point where I really felt that connection and that love again. And I guess it was in my 40s when I was sitting down meditating one day, and I was thinking about my relationship with my mom, and I felt again that little seed of resentment right in my heart, that tightness, that little Can you relate?
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, I saw the thing from a completely different perspective. See, I'd been looking over from here of bad mother. That she shouldn't have been that way. How could she do that? It damaged me. It
Anger, resentment, right.
Right. And all of a sudden, I saw it from over here, and I saw that she had really sacrificed her relationship with me in many ways, and her actions had set me on a path that had brought me to be the person I am today, and that I really like the person I am today, and I like what I get to do. And so in that moment, it went from I became a success in spite of my mother to I became a success because of.
Wow.
In that moment of from in spite of to because of, I had a complete emotional release. Everything that I'd been holding on to just let go. And you can see even now as I'm talking about it, I'm getting a little emotional again because I'm feeling that, that same sensation of that that real gratitude, because now I hold a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation towards my mother, because I recognize that she really was the reason I am who I am today.
And that's an important fact for everyone to realize when they've been through this. Not to call it a silver lining, but there is a lesson in all of this. And it's usually something that we have to look at from a much higher place. Again, you're close in that, you're full of the anger, you're ready to punch things. But when we start to look up and go, why me? Or why did this happen to me?
What's the value? Yeah, what's the value here?
Yeah. And
I like to believe that every situation and every circumstance comes with some gift.
mm-hmm.
You just have to be willing to find it. And sometimes it means digging.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it means stepping back. But you have to be willing to look, and you have to be willing to be open to letting that person, not letting them off the hook in terms of any responsibility, but really letting them off of your hook, where you're trying to be the judge, jury, executioner, and hold them prisoner in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Now, with your mom, can I ask, did you tell her that you forgave her?
I did.
And how did that feel?
That felt good. It took me a little while to tell her, but immediately the first thing that happened is that I really had a different kind of relationship with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that a lot of the separation, or actually most of the separation at that point, after a few decades, was my separation from her, my holding myself separate from her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I was able to tell her. Part of it was for me to really want to make peace with my mother before she died. Okay, now a mother is a different kind of a situation, because there's, a parental-child bond that goes beyond, that of a spouse or a partner. And also, I knew that my mother was not a narcissist. She, she was pretty intense in beliefs and could be fairly judgmental, but ultimately I knew that she really loved me and had my best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
The difference with a narcissist is you really got to be clear that it's in your best interest to go back and to tell that person you forgive.
Mm-hmm.
I know in most cases with a narcissist, once the relationship has ended and you've made that split, that you want to keep a physical separation. You don't want to be communicating.
Yeah.
Unless you have to with, like kids or something.
Yeah.
So, and also narcissists are really good at twisting things around.
Mm-hmm.
And using anything to their advantage. So, you don't have to tell the other person that you forgive, because really, again, it's not for them.
Yes. Yeah.
Not for their benefit. It's for your own benefit.
Yeah.
But in my case with my mom, I knew that telling her was part of my own healing and reintegration process.
Mm-hmm. And that's really important. Thank you for sharing that with us, because a lot of our listeners also have narcissistic parents.
Right.
And it's, how do I break that bond? How do I go no contact? And how do I, get away from it? So it is something that is for yourself, and it's not something that you're necessarily, if you have such a turbulent relationship with a parent, and it does you no good to go over there and say, hey, I forgive you, and use your judgment wisely, because this
Absolutely.
forgiveness is not part of going over there. For those of you who remember, on the day of my arrest, I went over to forgive my narcissist. Don't do that. It wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, there could be some downsides. But
Yeah, they don't like it. They just really don't. And I don't know. I think that if we can help the people forgive, and what about that expression, forgive and forget? It just was like coming out my mouth, and I don't like that. Is that like?
No, I don't like that either.
Yeah.
What I like to say is forgive and remember in a new way.
Mm.
Because again, you're changing the perspective. You're changing the story. You're going from a story of being a victim and viewing it as you were victimized, to
Mm-hmm.
viewing it as, wow, I gained something out of that. I was somehow empowered out of that.
Yeah.
That's the real key right there. When you shift that negative judgment, you're going from victim, which feels powerless, right? It
Mm-hmm.
feels bad, to, wow, okay, that was actually for my benefit, which feels
Mm-hmm.
good. Okay, yeah, I got something out of that I can use.
Yeah.
Whether it's, whether it's developing you as a person in some form or another, develop some qualities or characteristics, whether it's your children, whether it's introducing you to groups of people or other people that you never would have known otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Always something that you can find that has actually contributed to you as a result of being in any relationship or any situation.
I am writing a note down here on one of the people always want to know, is there something that is like completely unforgivable? And I have a very good example of that. We had a woman come to my church a few years ago, and her son was the mass shooter at the Amish schoolhouse many years ago. And to her, her shock and a mother's shock of what their child just did, and then they took their life, and it was a horrific experience for her, because now she is the enemy of the town. She is shamed and all of this inside, and she's burying her child. so
Right.
so there's a lot going on there. But the Amish people came to her the night that this happened, and they said they forgave her, and they meant it. And to the day she died about a year ago, she was working with them and helping the one surviving child that got shot, that was now paralyzed. And she became a part of their community. And
Right.
their open heart freed her heart, because she had all that shame and she had all that guilt. And when they forgave, she was able to go, I can I can forgive my son. I can move on. And then the shame wasn't there.
Yeah, and perhaps most important is to be able to forgive oneself.
Mm.
Because ultimately, she had to forgive herself because she was the one who was feeling the shame.
Mm.
And shame is the thought, there's something wrong with me. I'm a bad person. There's a
Mm.
difference between guilt and shame. Do you know that distinction?
Yeah.
So guilt is, I did a bad thing. Shame is, I'm bad. I'm a bad person, or there's something wrong with me, which is
Mm.
deeper.
Right.
And so she was the one who was really creating that shame for herself.
Mm-hmm.
People can try to shame you, but unless you grab it, unless you hold on to it, unless you accept it, it's just going to slide right off. Just like
Mm-hmm.
any kind of insult, any kind of comment, any kind of judgment. It
Yeah.
only will stick if you allow it to, if you take it in. And
And
so even with a narcissist, or especially, you've got to be willing to forgive yourself for getting into that situation, and letting go of any sense of shame or guilt or remorse. Oh, I should have known better. How did I ever do this? I'm so stupid. Whatever. To forgive yourself for all of that and let that stuff go, because that's actually the core of forgiveness, is forgiving yourself.
yeah. And I think self-confidence, when you reclaim your personal power, you
Mhm.
have more self-confidence. So you go back out into life in a much better, healthier place.
Yeah. And you can be expressed as, I think I mentioned this before, you can be expressed as yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not having to worry about what anybody else is thinking. When you're truly forgiven and you've forgiven yourself, then you can let go of any fear of other people's judgments.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the only approval that we ever seek is our own.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, with the shame, it's your own shame that you
Mm-hmm.
hold on to that affects you. It's other people can try to guilt you, other people can try to shame you, other people can try to do whatever. but you are in charge of your own emotions
Right.
and your own thoughts, which means you're in charge of your own emotions, because our thoughts deeply affect our emotions and our emotions deeply affect our thoughts.
Yeah. So, what can the viewers of our video and podcast do to move to the next step?
Well, the first thing is just to begin to be willing. So maybe soften up a little bit. And one way to do that is to begin to notice the cost of holding on to that anger and resentment.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a funny thing. Oftentimes we'll hold on to anger towards somebody else and hold on to resentment because we think that we're punishing them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll never forgive them. I'm going to punish them. But chances are they're out there just living their life, doing what they do, and they don't give a, they don't care. They don't give a hoot. And so you're just making yourself miserable by holding on to that stuff.
Exactly.
So one way to start to develop some willingness is to begin to look at the cost. Okay, what is it costing me to be angry at this person still? What is it costing me to hold on to these negative judgments? What is it costing me to insist that I will never forgive?
Mm-hmm.
How is it keeping me trapped? How is it keeping me imprisoned? How is it keeping me holding on to that person?
Right.
Again, I'm going to come back to that because I know that's something that none of your listeners or viewers want to do, is really be actively holding on to that person.
Right. And you just that I had this flashback of a man that came to one of my groups who slammed down his fist and said, "I'm never going to forgive my brother." And you know what? He probably won't, because he's got that shell around him. And yet, look at the anger. Look at that his whole life is ruled by a brother that doesn't care. He's going on with his life, and that's what pisses off the victim, saying, well, wait a second, now he's out having a good life. You get madder. So by forgiving and releasing, someone says your brother's name, it's like someone you used to know. It doesn't have to have that power.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You remove the negative judgment.
Yeah.
Remove the core of that resentment.
Yeah. So here's the big secret, is that Cliff and I have developed a course, and it is a course on liberating your mind and your heart. And it is designed for all of us to get out there. And what?
That's the title, Liberate Your Mind and Heart. Yeah.
I know. And it is about forgiveness, but it is so much more, because there is a lot more inside of us that we need to work on. And this is like an emotional kind of education.
Yeah. Can I give a description of it?
Yeah, I would love that.
It really is. It's emotional education. The course is designed to where forgiveness really is one of the later steps. You don't have to start out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire course is designed to help people, to help you develop a different way of thinking about things, to really step into a mindset and a set of perspectives that will have you feel empowered and confident instead of feeling like a victim, to be able to take charge of your life again, to understand things in new ways, as I've been talking about. Understand that everything that, your life is just a story that you tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the author of that story. And if you're the author of one story that's crappy, you can create a new story that makes you feel better and has you be more empowered in life.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do work with here in first recognition, like we were talking about, recognizing the costs,
Mm-hmm.
and then renouncing the old patterns. Okay, that wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Let me renounce those old ways of doing things, and
Mm-hmm.
if I can find some new ways that work better for me.
Yeah.
And then responsibility, really taking responsibility. This is a huge one, because it's so easy to point our fingers at somebody else and say, it's their fault. They're the ones who victimized me. It's their fault that I'm in this shape I'm in. It's their fault that my life is the way it is. But ultimately, our own lives are our own responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
Oh, yeah.
Whatever happens to us in our lives is at some level the result of our own choices and actions and decisions all along the way.
Right.
And so you can resist that and you can play victim, but it just keeps you stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Claiming responsibility is like saying, okay, I'm getting back in the driver's seat here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the steering wheel and I'm going to point my life in the direction I want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
So responsibility and then reconnection, connecting with something deeper within ourselves. And whether you're a spiritual or religious person and think of that in terms of a God or a deity, or whether it's just that deep inner wisdom that we all have within ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
getting back in connection with that and being able to seek guidance from it and trust it. And then reinterpretation, like I was talking about, taking those old events and reinterpreting them, finding the gift, finding the value. And that's really where release happens then. And so release, you're letting go of that old stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the step of reclaiming. Once you let go of the old stuff and the old ways and the negative patterns, you can reclaim new health or your original healthy patterns and your original personality. And you can reclaim all these characteristics and qualities that you may have shut down within yourself for decades.
Right.
And then from reclaiming, it's like recreating, creating a new vision for your life, really starting to see yourself in a new way and to get clear on your purpose. You ever have a question about like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose in life?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you find out. You get to find out what your purpose is. And once you're
Okay.
aligned with a vision and a purpose, then and only then, once you're really clear on who you are, your values, what's important to you, and where you're going and what you want, then if you choose and if it would be healthy, you have an opportunity to go and reconcile or to somehow reestablish the relationship. With a narcissist, that may not be the path you choose.
Mm-hmm.
But in most cases, probably not. But with my mother, with other relationships, going back and reconciling and recreating the relationship on new terms can be a really empowering thing to do.
Absolutely. And with a mother, a father, someone that is in your family, when you open your heart to that forgiveness, whether you let them know or not, you're opening up a door that will ride with you for the rest of your life. You're going to have a lot more freedom. Holidays, if you choose to still spend them with them, aren't going to have that horrible meaning. You're not going to be going there, with handcuffs on, going, oh God, I got to go again.
Right.
If you choose to engage and be a part of their life, it has a different meaning. And if you don't choose it, then you get to be free of that expectation. Oh, I should be at my mother's house because it's Thanksgiving. No, I'm at peace. She's at peace where she is. I'm here and things are good. So having that empowerment is really great.
And I'll let you in on a secret. When you forgive and when you're clear of all that stuff, it's a whole lot easier to set and hold healthy boundaries.
Mm.
And that's really part of the process of reconciliation as well, is to be able to define that relationship in a new and healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
Which includes boundaries if necessary.
Yeah. And everybody listening to this, most people that are in a relationship or were in a relationship with someone with a destructive personality, all they're looking for is a healthy relationship with someone else next, and if they don't heal this, they bring that anger, they bring that triggers, they bring everything along for the ride, and the next relationship is going to suffer because you didn't really heal and that anger's still inside you.
Well, really, what you're doing is you're bringing that other person into the new relationship,
Oh, right.
right? Because remember, as long as you're holding on, as long as you've got resentment and anger, you're actually in your mind, in your emotional world, you are holding that person with you every moment of every day. So, yeah, how's that going to work in a brand new relationship if you bring the old abuser into the new relationship with you?
Right. It's not going to be a good thing.
It's probably not going to work so well.
Not too well, no. I think that we have to imagine our life in the place that we want it to be. And
Exactly.
I took your course, and then we talked, and you've got one that we've really designed to help you guys. And it's really important to you to be willing to take a different stance and be willing to do the work. This is part of the work. This is part of getting rid of the baggage that we need to take. So I invite you to go to my website, narcissistabusesupport.com, click on the button on the top that says Get Help. This is an answer for you guys. And Cliff is a magical, magical person who I don't think I really understood forgiveness until I read your book. And I don't think I really lived it until I did the course. So thank you for helping me, because that was a piece of the puzzle that I felt I was entitled to hold on to that anger. I felt
Yeah.
that if I just got mad enough that they would feel it. But nobody cared but me. And
Right.
now that I've gotten it to just sort of go away, I feel like a different person. I don't have those triggers. I don't have that anxiety. And
Well, you are a different person. You truly are, because when you forgive yourself, when you let go of that stuff at a deep emotional level, it really changes who you are. It changes the way that you see the world. It changes the way that you interact in the world. It changes the way that you can create and have relationships with other people.
mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I feel like a different person. And according to my Facebook page, I look like a different person too. So,
I was going to say that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that
When you
was,
let go of all that baggage, you really do
yeah.
not only feel years younger, but often can look years younger as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, who is this course designed for? Is it designed for someone in the very beginning of their journey? Where would someone want to put this kind of healing into their healing plan?
Yeah, I would say it's really designed for somebody who's been a ways through their journey,
Mm-hmm.
who has made the separation, who's begun to reestablish themselves and their lives separate from the abuser or the narcissist. It's for somebody who has, in many other ways, is really in pretty good shape, but just is holding on, recognizes that they've been holding on, and finds themselves uh, becoming unnecessarily agitated at times, or reactionary, overreacting to particular situations, or maybe dropping down into a pit of uh, pity, or a pit of shame or guilt or anything else like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's for somebody who's out of the situation, who's safe, and who is really ready to move on. Who's been trying to move on maybe, but feels like you keep bumping up against some barrier.
Right. There's a difference between survivor and surthriver. And I think this is the leap. This is one of the things that you can do for yourself that is, you just don't know why. You're just like, why are things still bothering me? It's been 3 years. It's been 2 years. Why can't I just let go? And this is the reason. This is something that you can do to help yourself to move on and to create the life that you wanted. So by releasing this, by understanding and letting that baggage off at the curb, you're going to get better.
Right. Yeah, and again, it really is it's all about the emotional education. It's about completely shifting the way that you think about things, that you see and view yourself. It's about giving you a toolbox, a set of tools that you can use going forward in your life as well. Not only perspectives, but actual tools. One of the things that happens in the course is that I do most of the work, or we do together. I will guide you through during the video course, what I call internal exercises. They're like guided visualizations. And so you learn some techniques for guided visualization that can really help you to access that deeper level within yourself, to go beyond the mind and into the unconscious, or the deeper emotional levels, and clean house.
I found those to be so powerful because I use them all the time. If my sister calls and I'm no contact, I get that. You get hit with it. And I turn those things on. I listen to them again, and I just clear that out. I have a tool. It doesn't mean we're going to never encounter that feeling again, but 95% of it's gone. And now you have a tool that you can use, like that visualization, to just, all right, I got this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the course is some work, but of course the whole journey is some work, right?
You know what? When you're working for yourself versus gathering papers for a divorce, this is good. We have to look at it that this is like the icing on the cake, and it is something that we owe ourselves. When we talk about not having self-love and we do something like this for ourselves, that is the ultimate self-love. And I really recommend that you guys take this and check it out.
You know what? You just said the key words there, self-love, because I forgot to talk about this. That really it's what it's all about. It's getting back to the place where you can love and accept yourself completely.
Mm-hmm.
You forgive yourself, and when you forgive yourself for all your past indiscretions, for all your past transgressions, for all of that other stuff, you can just love yourself completely. And I want to be clear, just one more thing about this is that, for a lot of people, the word forgiveness has a lot of religiosity wrapped around it. And this is not a religious course. There is a spiritual aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, doesn't matter if you don't believe in religion or God or whatever else, it works. You can allow it to work for you. You can have it work for you. I'm not preaching anything, no dogmas, anything like that. It's just really all about you.
Yeah.
About you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Cliff. I really appreciate it. And check out our course on narcissistabuseupport.com, and you will get to see Cliff on lots of videos because he's very, very good.
And get to know this voice very, very well.
I know, it's very calming. When I listen to the videos, I just sit there and it's like you're just this calming, beautiful soul that takes us to the next level. So thank you.
So, you don't have to look at this face the whole time either. There are lots of slides. So. Lots of other pictures and things to look at.
See, you just put yourself down. That was a self put down.
Yeah, but it was done in a self-loving way.
Oh, good. Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cliff. We will talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on. And it's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you.
Thank you.